Hello everybody and welcome back. And the party are in this ruin with about 4 remaining Traldar and their giant lizards. And we fought off quite a horde of undead that seemed to come from nowhere and to rush us. Night wore on and the Traldar kept watch expecting another attack, which didn't happen, but according to the rules can happen. And we wake up the next day and there is a lot to be done. We can memorize some spells and we can do some healing, and I will do, we had curing spells and staves of healing and things like that to use before we went to sleep. So it's a bit of a waste to not use them, then go to sleep and wake up the next day and use them. You understand what I mean? So we'll use the Staff of Healing on Liz, who is at 17 from 21. Yeah, and she's back up to full health. We might as well use the Staff of Healing on Stephen, who's 13 out of 26. And he gets an extra 9 points. So he's at 22, and we can use a second Cure Light Wounds on him. And he's back up to full health of 26, and our last Cure Light Wounds can be used on Donard. Yep, and he's back up to 42. Then we went to sleep, then we wake up and we have all our healing back again. But there is, however, a problem, which is concerning these Traldar, because 2 of their number were killed by the Whites. These Traldar have seen enough of these undead attacks, and they know what happens next. What will happen is that 2 fallen Traldar will rise again in a few days' time as Whites themselves. As I've said, they've witnessed this happen, and they seem to have really no solution for it other than to completely burn the body. So we find the 2 Traldar, who look ashen white and are stone cold. We have to build up quite a large fire. You can't burn a body on just a campfire. So most of the morning is spent collecting dried wood, of which there's plenty of twigs and branches around these ruins. We create quite a large funeral pyre and we burn the 2 bodies on it. And they ask Donard, who they realise is a priest, to put some kind of blessing on them. Donard doesn't know any blessings, he's never really been faced with this before. What he can try and do is use a flask of holy oil to pour onto the funeral pyre. Well, he obviously can't do that while it's burning. We have to wait. I think we have to spend most of the morning waiting for the fire to burn out just to make sure these bodies are gone. So that will actually take up most of the day. Now the thing about the holy water is, it was probably in one of the backpacks that got carried off by the griffin. We did recover one backpack, so there's a 50-50 chance that the holy water was in the backpack we recovered. So I'm going to do a percentage check, and if we roll 50 or less, then we still have the 2 flasks of holy water. And that's a 14, so yes we do. And one of those is given up in the late afternoon by pouring it over the remains of the ashes on the funeral pyre, and that will hopefully stop the Whites from rising again. Now I will check the Dungeon Master's manual. Right, okay, energy drain is explained on page 24. Any person totally drained of life energy by a White will become a White in 1 to 4 days and will be under the control of their Slayer. Well, the Slayer was killed, so what does that mean? They wander about aimlessly with no control? Okay, energy drain is explained here, and a 1st level character hit by an energy drain attack is killed, but there doesn't seem to be anything on what we would call an exorcism. Maybe there is in another rulebook, but Donard has tried to improvise an exorcism there, and fingers crossed that will work. Right, so where are the party? I think this village was about here, judging from my previous pencil marks, and the village of the Traldar is called Roncan, and that's where we have to go to next. And by the time we get there, it's going to be into the evening. So we've got plenty of time to walk and talk, and the first thing that becomes apparent, especially to Donhard, is that these undead were not the usual off-the-shelf variety. Something was up. So we talk to the Traldar and ask, is that normal? And they shake their heads in great fear and say, no, it is normal for us, but these undead are controlled by the mutts. And the mutt is of course slang for a dog, and that's slang for the dog faces of the Hutakans. So the Hutakans obviously seem to have some way of controlling the undead and creating some sort of armies that patrol this valley. We're going to have to sort that out. That can't be allowed to happen. But I'm going to roll again some dice, and if anybody gets a 5 or 6, they're going to come off with an observation. And that is Carrick, our dwarf. And Carrick says, and he has a quiet word with the party members. And he says, there's not something quite right about that story. I mean, anytime we have seen one of the ruined temples of these ancient people, the undead have taken it over. These people do not seem to have a good relationship with the undead. I don't think what we're being told is quite true. And of course, that adds to the party's suspicions that they aren't being told everything they really need to know. By the time we get to the evening, the party will make it to the small settlement of Runcan, and we will see what happens to them then. Right, it's getting into nightfall. The sky has clearly gotten darker. What else can we say? The party have been in the valley long enough to know it gets much darker because of the surrounding mountainside. We're being taken by the Traldar to their village, and they give this area a wide berth. And we follow the river along and eventually turn northward, and in front of us we see a settlement surrounded by a wall and a ditch. It looks well fortified, and there are a couple of gatehouses. And it looks like this, and it's called Runcan. We're ushered inside, and it's not long before the gates close when we hear yet again another of these blood-curdling screams. And the Traldar all stop and look at each other and shake their heads, and one of our escorts, who we've become more conversational with, shakes their head and says, that's another one of our patrols lost. And our party ask, it sounded like more than they were just dying from an attack. And the Traldar just shudder and tell us of a creature that has no name, but they don't want to talk about it anymore. Of course, that doesn't stop nosy old Malin from asking, where does the creature come from? And the Traldar will just reply with, the chief will tell you. And we're taken to this central building here, which is 3 stories high. And we are introduced to the chief of the Traldar, this character here, Guri Ben Kal. He's described as being male, 28, short and very muscular, and he wears a brightly coloured lizard skin cloak, which is his badge of office. The Traldar who are with us introduce us and tell the chief and all the other people in the building of our heroic deeds in both attacking the mutts and fending off an attack of the undead. Guri Ben Kal nods wisely, bids us to sit, and asks if we are hungry or whether we need beds. He says it's late and we will talk more about this in the morning, but of course Malin blurts out again and says, can you tell us anything about this unnamed monster? Guri Ben Kal just blows out through his teeth and shakes his head and says, we know it attacks our people, but it doesn't appear to attack the mutts. And he nods very slowly at us and says, take from that what you will. The inference being that it is the Hutakans who control this unnamed menace. As the party are coming to the conclusion, these Traldar either tell half-truths or have a misunderstanding on how things work, so we meet that with some skepticism. But we're going to go to bed anyway, and we're going to wake up the next day. Now that we're in with the Traldar and we actually have a village, we're going to see what the next day brings. But however, as we are gathering there in the hall, conversation turns to this unnamed stranger, and Liz just rolls her eyes and says, unnamed monsters, unnamed strangers, what else don't these people know? And this unnamed person they saw flying through the air, going towards the Hutakan village. Of course, Sylvia says, was he wearing a yellow robe? And the Traldar messenger nods and says yes. How do you know? And Carrick says, this person is an old enemy of ours. And Stephen blurts out, you have to tell us where he's gone. Now these Traldar are quite glad to tell us that an old enemy of ours has gone to the Hutakan village, as that will give us a very good reason to go there and, well, cause trouble, one assumes. So again, we've been given a lot to think about. So when the party are gathered together in the evening in a room that's been set aside for us with our beds, Donard makes the point that now we have a very good reason to go to the Hutakan village and see things from their point of view, but we can always do it on the pretense that we're going to capture Golthar. And yes, I think that's what the plan will be for tomorrow morning. Right, the party are spending their first night in the palace in the small settlement of Ronkan. The chief has given over one of the spare rooms. Some sort of hasty bed has been set up for each of the party members. And as they're going to sleep, Liz just gives out a big sigh and says, remind me again, what are we doing here? And Stephen says, we're after Golthar, aren't we? He has to pay for all the deaths he caused back home. Liz shrugs. Sylvia says, I thought we wanted to travel and see the world. Liz shrugs. Malin says, we're in a forgotten valley filled with secrets and mysteries. Don't you want to know more? And again, Liz shrugs. And Carrick says, this place has a reputation for being loaded with treasure and other beautiful artifacts. And again, Liz shrugs. And she turns to Donard and says, why do you think we're here? And Donard shrugs. So they go to sleep and they wake up the next day and they are breakfasted in the palace. And when they leave, all the village has gathered around them here and is staring at them in wonder. So we're going to be given a guide on some of these giant lizards to travel to the Hutakan settlement of Baizata. I'm guessing that's how you pronounce that. And Baizata is not too far away. In fact, it only seems to be 2.5 miles away, maybe 3 if you follow the path. That's within fighting distance. We're going to ask our guide to leave us here at these ruins and let us go our own way. He is more than happy to do that. And when we're travelling by ourselves, Stephen puts up a hand for everybody to halt and suggests we don't ride with the lizards much further because these are cavalry. This is Stephen using his horse knowledge to remind us that riding these lizards looks like we're here for trouble. That's a good point. Malin asks, what should we say to them if they want to know about the Hutakans we found dead and the ambush where we killed more? And Carrick gives Malin a big hard stare under some bushy eyebrows. He lifts up a big fat finger and says, we say nothing. Malin shrugs. Okay. So we're going to make it all the way to Baitaxa by ourselves and we are going to finally meet, well, hopefully speak rather than be attacked by the Hutakans. Right, so the party see the, well, settlement, I was going to call it city, settlement of Baizata ahead of them, and coming out of the gates is a patrol of these Hutakans. We've seen them before, we're not that surprised or in awe of their ancient lineage, but they do have their spears pointed at us. The only thing we can do is walk up to them with our weapons sheathed. They look to have taken up a defensive stance, they're not on the attack. So we can get quite close enough to speak, to put up a palm, which is a sign of peace, and to say, we come in peace, essentially. The Hutakans are not a fighting people, and they seem more than glad to parley rather than fight. They invite us into the walls, and they take us into this building here. Of course, everybody else lines the, well, they're not really streets, are they? Everybody else comes outside to look at us as we go into the main temple, and we are introduced to Kfordeds, who is this character here, and she is the high priest of the Hutakans. Whilst we're in the temple, they don't bid us to sit and make ourselves comfortable. Quite the opposite, they expect us to stand in the middle of the floor and answer some questions. For example, who are we and what do we want? And we say that we're looking for a man in yellow robes, a human like us. And this makes the Hutakans bristle, and the priestess asks, are you friends with this person? And Stephen says, most certainly not. He has killed many of our people. That was a bit hasty, but nonetheless the Hutakans relax, and the priestess says, "This man you speak of came to us looking for help. We did not like him. We sent him on his way, but he abused our hospitality and he stole things from us, some valuable things. We would like them back." And this is a chance for us to at least break the ice by saying, "Very well, tell us where this yellow-robed man went, and we will, in exchange for the information, our aim is to kill him, and if that means getting your stuff back, then we will do so." Right, now that does obviously work in favour of the party, so we have a chance to ask the Hutakans who are the Traldar. We aren't going to accuse the Hutakans of slavery. That's not that diplomatic an accusation to make at this point. But what the Hutakans can do is they can just sneer. Oh, how does a dog tends to sneeze? They seem to make a dog sneeze noise, followed by a bit of a yipping type laugh. And the obvious implication is they don't think much of the Traldar. But we can sort of broach the subject in a more diplomatic way by saying the Traldar have accused you of some heinous crimes, and that just causes more sneering laughter from the Hutakans. And their version of the story is the Traldar are nothing but savage barbarians. Without them, they would still be living in caves. The priestess says, "We were the ones who told them how to make clothes. We were the ones who told them how to build structures. We were the ones that helped them build their own villages. And they repaid us through war and pillaging. And here they are, living outside our gates, and they're far the worse off for it. If they had remained under our tutelage, they would have advanced much further, and their lives would be much better." And she gives a dismissive wave of a paw and says, "So be it. If that's their choice, they can suffer." Right, there might be some truth to that claim, but the one thing we did notice when we were brought into the city or the settlement was that it was indeed falling apart. Now Carrick, who is a dwarf and therefore a lover of masonry, begins to wonder to himself, if these Hutakans are so good at construction and teaching it, how come they can't repair their own temples and buildings? Clearly it isn't adding up. I think they need the Traldar to do the heavy lifting, and they aren't quite as superior or independent of the Traldar as they like to think they are. But having said that, the settlement of Baizata is still in a much better state of repair than Roncan, which was the settlement of the Traldar. We have other questions to ask. We mentioned the temple. We mentioned the undead and how the undead attacked it and they weren't unusual, and the Traldar have blamed the Hutakans for the control of the undead, and this of course causes a lot of dismissive harumphing among the Hutakans who are gathered in the temple with us, and they say the Traldar don't know what they're talking about. There is an ancient temple to the goddess Flower. At the mention of Flower, they all make some sort of contrite gesture in front of themselves to show deference to the name of that goddess. And indeed, the priestess wears on her chest a medallion which is called the Star of Flower. So no, they are not the ones who send these armies of undead, though Cafordes, the priestess, does say quite forthrightly if she wanted to, she could do, but no. And they explain that the temple is the source of all the valley's troubles. There is a great evil in the temple that the Hutakans have done their best to control. They used to set themselves up in the temple and perform rituals to keep the undead and the evil at bay and to try and contain it. The Traldar attacked these Hutakan priests on the assumption that it was the Hutakans that were sending the undead after the Traldar. This was a mistake. It was the Hutakans who were suppressing the undead, and therefore the Traldar, by killing the Hutakans, destroyed the last line of defence against the undead, leaving this temple and taking over the valley. Right, now that does seem like a plausible story, and we're also told that Golthar, the yellow-robed man, has gone to the temple to seek, well, one wonders what he does want to seek, but the priestess tells us if he himself is evil, then he is after knowledge. So we again have been given a lot to think about. We are here in Baizata, the Hutakan settlement. Roncan, the Traldars, is there, and this Temple of Flower is there. So yes, it is indeed the Traldar who get the first dose of any evil that comes out of the temple. Okay, by a process of just listening to these people's stories, we have been given a destination, the Temple of Flower. It could bring about peace in the valley if we are the ones that put the undead to rest, finally. That seems to be a bone of contention between these two peoples. Though Donard is skeptical and says they have deeper troubles than that, that's probably correct. But at least we have somewhere to go to finally get Golthar and understand why he wanted to find the Lost Valley in the first place, what secrets are here that he wants to get hold of, and why was it worth the murder of so many of Stephen's kinfolk. That's where we will leave it today, and the party the next time will go to the Temple of Flower. They will pass by the Traldar, and they will obviously call in to tell them what's going on. But I'm going to wrap it up here for today. We're coming towards the end of this adventure. The last few pages of this module are all that's left, and we have yet to encounter this, what's been known as the unnamed creature. Indeed, we will have to ask the Hutakans what they think of it. Right, so until next time, I'll see you then.